Hello everybody, my name is Thijs, a.k.a. Shamanpainter, and welcome to another Rotterdam White Scars video. Today I'll be showing you how to paint up your Age of Sigmar Dominion set and how to paint specifically the Vindictors from that set in the Knights Excelsior color scheme. If you like this video, give a thumbs up, and if you really liked our content, please consider subscribing. Let's get started! So this will be the final result. It's one of the most popular color schemes out there. It's the white and blue toned Knights Excelsior chamber from Stormcast Eternal, and in this video I'll show you all about it. So before you get started, make sure your model is completely assembled, all mold lines removed and all nicely fitting. And then I primed the model entirely with a Gracier primer from Games Workshop. And that's the primer normally used for contrast paints, but it is also a nice cold grey tone to be used for our white parts. And as most of the model was white, it was nice to start out with this color. Then I started off color blocking all the blue parts with Alloy-Tech Blue, also from Games Workshop. All colors are from Games Workshop today, and it's our base color for our contrast paint. And it's also the same principle I used in my previous Stormcast video, where I showed you how to paint the Hammers of Sigmar. It's really worthwhile to take your time here. Make sure you apply only the color on the parts that are meant to have that color on it. So make sure you clean up all your mistakes, especially for the Gracier parts, because white is a very vulnerable color when it comes to other colors. So the second color we're applying here is Mechanica Standard Grey on all the black parts, mainly the undergarments and the leather parts, such as the belt and the shield strap. Also make sure it's really neat and tidy. I was thinking about using a brown color, but I thought it would be really cool to keep a really cool tone into this color scheme, and with the blue, the white, and also the black parts that create a really cool vibe, and very different from last Stormcast model I painted with the Hammers of Sigmar color scheme, which is gold and warm and orange reddish. So where you see me here, I'm actually cleaning up the entire model, make sure that all the parts that I accidentally hit with another color, I cleaned them up. It may take a couple layers to accomplish your goal of a clean surface, and also a couple parts, especially underneath the shield, were very difficult for the primer to hit with the spray can, so I also applied some extra Gracier primer on those parts. And as you can see, it took more time to clean it up than it actually was to paint the blue and the grey parts, but that's fine. So check every part of the model. This is the time. Now on to the next part, and for this I changed into a broader and bigger brush, because we're gonna do some Basilicanum Grey contrast paint over all the white parts of the model. And this will create a really cool starting point for our white color scheme. And as you can see, it might be a bit darker than you expected, but it gives a really good contrast base for the rest of our layers and highlights. And I also wanted to have some more depth into the white armor. Being completely white was a bit boring to me, so I tried to spice it up a bit by being a bit heavy on the contrast. It doesn't mean you have to apply this contrast paints heavily. It means that the color tone that we choose was a bit more contrasting than you would normally get when you're painting a white color scheme. You could also do this with Apothecary Grey or Apothecary contrast paint, Apothecary White, or a different tone. But I think Basilicanum Grey is really pushing it, and it creates the effect that I was looking for. So finishing up everything, please do keep an eye on this model whilst it is drying. Because of the contrast paints, it can sag down a bit to the bottom of your model, and you have to continuously check if everything is drying up properly. And you have to do it immediately. So the second part is the Black Templar contrast paint, covering all the grey parts that we, the mechanical standard grey parts, such as the belt, the undergarment, and the shield strap, and giving you a good base for the black color scheme. Now this is a mix of a couple blues, mainly Leviathan blue from the contrast paints range, and it's actually the same as the previous Stormcast video, as I said before. You can apply this in a fairly thick coat, but keep in mind that you also want to show a bit of the Allotech blue underneath. If you apply too thick of a coat, it will become a bit bland, and it will show only one color. Because of the slight difference between the Allotech blue and this blue color, it's good to keep in mind. So the first step is painting back and making the armor neat again, and for this I used some Administratum Grey. I could also use Grey Seer, but I mixed in a lot of water into this paint to keep it as translucent as possible. I covered the armor with a couple coats of Administratum Grey, and also making sure that I took my time for this step, because this is the step that makes your model clean again. If you use Grey Seer is a bit too much grainy. It has too much grain into it, because it's actually a primer and not a layer color. So for that reason I chose Administratum Grey. I took a bit more time on the helmet, because I thought the helmet had a little bit more intricate details than the armor plates. Although the armor plates, especially on the chest parts, are really visible on the model, so you really have to take care of that. And also one of the decisions I made was to, as you can see here, there's a clear shadow from the shield onto the model. I wanted to keep that shadow in there, so I covered a bit less on the left chest plate for the viewers on the right side. I kept it a bit more dark than the other side, because his arm is all pulled up and his shield is covering most of his armor. So the next step is to create some variation. I tried Palette Witch Flash. Palette Witch Flash is a more warmer tone of grey white, but it works out perfectly to make the last transition into the pure white color, and it also gives a bit more warmth back into the model because of all the cool tones in the black and the blues. I thought it would be a perfect second to last layer before the final edge highlight. And this is all layering, although you can see me putting in some edge highlights on the rims of certain armor plates. It is still definitely a layer. So I tried to do some volumetric highlighting, and that is covering parts the way the light would hit it. So that's not always in a very sharp line. That can also be a bigger part of the model, or a bigger surface area, especially on the chest plates. Also covering the calves. Those are really fun parts to paint, because they have a really nice curvature into them. I thought the back plates were a bit weird, because of it's almost like a copy of the front, almost like their chest plates. So that was a kind of weird sensation. I didn't really know how to create a desired effect, but we managed to pull it off, I think. So as you can see here, this will be the final stage, and that is a really sharp edge highlight with pure white. I used White Scar for this. You can also use the base layer or any white for that matter, but I took my time, was really careful not to block too much, and just covering the edges. Just small lines and dots, and making sure there wasn't too much. Because the difference between Palette Witch Flash and White Scar is quite small, it is also more difficult to create a very convincing edge highlight. So I had to really put in small amounts of white, otherwise it would be too much of a blur. And this is also a time-consuming step, especially when you have to concentrate for longer periods of time. I would never recommend doing edge highlighting more than half an hour, and after that you can go finish some base coats on different models, because otherwise you will lose focus and you will also lose the sharpness of your edge highlights. Something I lost somewhere here, but I think it worked out great in the end. I had to cover up some parts. Now finishing up the black parts with some Dawnstone. I used Dawnstone and I just put some edge highlights on there. And we would also finish off with some Administratum Grey. And just simply completing all the steps necessary to create a convincing black look. A little bit less of a sharp edge on the undergarment and the shoes, and a bit more sharper on the belt, on the buckle, the leather belt, because that was had some clear defined edges instead of the more sloppy cloaked parts of the undergarment, for example. Then starting off with the blue parts, it's again a more broader edge highlight of Alloytech blue. Covering the rims of the shoulder pads and the rims of the inner parts of the shield. Also taking my time, just covering it slowly. But I also want to do some volumetric highlighting, so I water it down with a lot of Lama medium and create a cloudy patch of Alloytech blue on the uppermost parts of the shoulder pads to create the effect of a shiny part of the model, and did it on the back and the front. That's also something we will repeat with the next layer, which is Hoeth blue. And when we do Hoeth blue, that will also cover the edge highlights, and we will also cover the cloudy parts on the volumetric highlights on the shoulders. So smaller this time. Alloytech blue went all around the shield, and the Hoeth blue will only be on certain parts of the shield to exaggerate the sunlight touching those parts. And also with Hoeth blue, mix it down with a lot of water or Lama medium and create a small, tinier patch into the already existing patch of Alloytech blue. And then the edge highlight will be finished off with some Venetian grey, and that will be only the really sharp edges, or just the points of the tips of the shoulder pads, and not necessarily an entire edge will be covered with Venetian grey. It will just be touched upon. So the white, the black and the blue are now all three finished. So it's time to cover some accessories. For example, the shaft of the spear and the hilt of the sword. For this I used Volupus Pink, which is a contrast paint, and I think it's the same color we use for the Hammers of Sigmar. So this might seem familiar for those who also watched the previous video. And then we're gonna cover with Skull Crusher Brass, Skull Crusher Bronze, which is a more warm-toned bronze gold color. It's quite different than Liberated Gold because it has more orange in it and less yellow. Be careful, the shield has a little ledge that's also on the back side of the shield, and I had quite some difficulties painting those parts properly. As you can see me doing here, I was continuously turning around the model to make sure I touched up the right parts of the model, but it was quite difficult to get the entire edge on the back side of the model, of the shield. So make sure that you're decide if you want to paint that gold or just the same color as the back of the shield. That's no problem at all. Also covering the medallions on the shield and the right hand shoulder pad, And also the little arch on top of his head will also be painted gold as an accessory. Take your time. This takes a lot of twisting and turning the model upside down to completely cover the model with gold. But it's worth it. Now we're gonna do the same with the silver parts that will be painted Stormos silver. And start with the buckle of the belt, and also the spikes on the spear, and the blade of the spear as well. So when you're painting models, the further into your progress, the harder it is to fix mistakes. So that's why we covered a lot of base colors in the first steps, because that's the time that we were able to still fix certain problems. But if I would touch the white parts now with the silver or gold, it's almost impossible to fix those mistakes. So keep in mind that you are very careful at this stage. So now we're going to cover all the metallic parts with RWS Earthshade. We're not going to do the Guilliman Flash or Reichland Flash, because that's way too orange, way too red, and would ruin the effect that we wanted to have with the more colder colors. And RWS Earthshade is more grey brown. It doesn't have a lot of warm tones in it, so that's a perfect color, I think, to cover the metallic parts on this model. Be really careful that you don't touch any of the grey, because there's absolutely no brown tones in the grey white parts. As I said before, those are really hard to cover up now. So painting it back with Skull Crusher Bronze, Brass, not sure which one it is. Make sure you highlight most of the parts, but don't over exaggerate your highlighting. Keep some of that RWS Earthshade visible. And make sure you cover as much as needed. So the second layer will be Liberated Gold. It is a Stormcast after all, so Liberated Gold is also a quite toned down gold color. It isn't as gold, as yellow as Retributor or Gehenna's Gold, for example. This should be a perfect tone to finish the last layer of the gold. Then we'll, after covering all the bits that you wanted to have Liberated Gold on, we will continue painting the silver and the gold parts with Stormos Silver. So Stormos Silver is also the last highlight of the gold parts. It will also be the highlight we will use for the silver parts. So bring out the cold tones again. Make sure it's not too bright and too vibrant of a warm tone. And also making sure that the silver parts are shiny, as they are almost magical weapons. And I'll make sure that one part of the blade was highlighted from the top down, and the other part is highlighted from the bottom up. So you get a really contrasty feel in it. Could have done a bit more on the blade, to be honest. Could have done a bit more of a Black Templar maybe in it to really exaggerate the contrast between the top and the bottom parts. But that's something maybe you guys can try. And I'm looking forward to see your results as well. How did you pick up this model? So now the pink parts. So we start off with some pink horror. Just dotting down some lines and covering the parts that we want to, and then finishing up with some cacophony purple, which is a bluish purple, also with the cold tones, exaggerating the cold feel again. This is going to be a bit of a spoiler, but looking at this tutorial now, I think it would have been really cool to have an icy, cold mountain base. But I went for a more warmer forest themed base in the end. But
looking at it now, it could have been a really cool option. So the only thing left to do is Insignia on the lightning bolts on the shield and the shoulder pad, which we will paint Gracier, and covering it in a couple layers to make sure it's completely covered. Also turning the entire model upside down and following the directions of the lightning bolts, and keep on twisting and turning. That makes it a lot easier to work with, and that's also why I use a paint handle, because that makes it a lot more easier to work with such strange directions. Also, one of the last steps that we will be doing on this model, and here comes the contrast paint, is aromatic blue, which is a sky turquoise kind of color, which really gives the feel of the lightning being electrified and being pure energy radiating from the medallion on the shield. Now after that's done, cover most of the lightning bolt back with Gracier, focusing on the middle parts of the insignia, and then finally try to do a pinpoint highlight, just the little dots and the little stripes of pure white scar in this case. And after finishing up the base, this will be the final step, and this is how your result would probably look like as well. So thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing and liking this video as well. And if you really want to support us even more, please consider our Patreon. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.